we come on now to a point that Jeremy raised, which is that if criminal law is a censuring institution, and if I'm saying that D and E should be censured to the same extent because effectively they both tried to do the same thing and that was all that they're responsible for, does that have any implications for the form of the law? And here, and I imagine John would say this is where I'm being forced to say something against my intuitions, I would have to answer yes, because I think if the law were being logical, all the offences in the law should be attempts. So there shouldn't be any crime of murder, there should be attempted murder. There shouldn't be any crime of theft, there should be attempted theft. There shouldn't be any crime of causing death by dangerous driving, there should only be dangerous driving. Because that is all that we are culpable for, that's all that lies within our power. The actual causing of the result lies outside our control. So representative labelling, for me, on this view, would mean that all crimes are attempts or endangerment crimes or whatever. Of course, no system is like that, and there are various reasons why a system isn't like that, wouldn't be publicly acceptable and so forth. Those that John mentioned as social policy reasons, and we won't pursue, but one could see why there are reasons why the system is not that way. I'm suggesting that in principle, that is the way it ought to be, because in principle, that is all we are rightly held liable for. Oh, yes. Now, to come to a particular issue that John raised, and I think Jeremy too, I think the same line of argument I'm trying to develop here also applies to constructive crime. So, if we take John's example, A intends to cause a common assault or battery to B, just a simple push, a vigorous push, but an assault. In one scenario, B is upset at this and turns tail and walks off. In another scenario, B loses his balance when pushed, falls backward, cracks his head on the pavement, dies from a brain hemorrhage. Now, in the case of the of that second example, that's manslaughter in English law. But the question is A rightly held liable for that? Now, on my analysis, what A is culpable for and is therefore rightly held liable for is simply the assault, the push. And he should be convicted and sentenced on the basis of pushing someone else angrily, if that's what he did. But there is a different view that's emerged from John's writings, and Jeremy has taken this up as well, which is that one of the key issues in analysing problems like this is that if a person intentionally violates another's interest by, in this way, they change their normative position, and it's thereafter not wrong to hold them liable for consequences which fall in the same family of offences. Now, I think John originally developed this view in relation to a very peculiar English offence called assault occasioning actual bodily harm. So the example here would be that A pushes B, as in my example, and let's say B stumbles and suffers some injury to his arm or something like that, so it breaks his arm or something. Something much more than A ever thought would result from this mere push. Now, the English law's analysis of that is that the fact that A intended an assault, a common assault, is enough to render the person liable for the more serious injury that in fact happened. And John justifies this by saying that this is because A has changed his normative position by committing the intentional assault, and therefore he can rightly and fairly be held liable for a more serious harm within the same family. And John would add, and did add a few moments ago, there's no rule of law objection to that one, because it's quite plain that that is the law, it's in the same family, so that's acceptable. Warning has been given, fair warning has been given that is the rule. Now I object to that because I say that the culpability in that example is simply the culpability for a common assault. There is no culpability into the higher level of harm that actually occurred. And what I call this is the principle of correspondence, which Jeremy has eloquently argued against in another place. My argument is that there must be a correspondence between the culpability element and the conduct or result element of the crime. So if the crime is assault, then you must have the culpability for the assault. If the crime is a higher one of causing injury, then you need the culpability for that. John and Jeremy say no. They say it's enough that you have changed your normative position, crossed a moral threshold. If it's within the same family, then it's justifiable to hold you liable for the higher degree of harm. Now, that's in the context of the law of assaults. How would you apply that to the case I mentioned a few moments ago, where A pushes B and B staggers backward, dies, and the case is one of manslaughter? Now, is that the same situation or is it a different situation? Well, interestingly enough, that is where the proponents of the other thesis reach for some kind of restricted principle. And Jeremy has developed the principle here that there should be a principle that there shouldn't be too great a moral distance between the harm intended and the harm actually caused. So I think Jeremy feels that the moral distance between the common assault and manslaughter is in fact too wide, and therefore that in that sense the gap is too great. But I think that the gap is too great even in the simple case of the assault which causes injury. I think the argument should be that there should be correspondence between the culpability requirement and the result occurring. Going back to where I started, I think that's because the actual consequences, be they greater, as in that case, or be they less great, as in the case of the attempt that misfires, the actual consequences are beyond the control of the actor.